The second and the third I can probably deal with together. The second corollary to the existence of the mind is the non-existence of the self. The third is the non-existence of God. Now, of course, these are not directly inferred from the existence of the mind. You could postulate the existence of the mind and postulate the existence of a soul, postulate the existence of God, postulate the existence of the tooth fairy, and so on. You could have all sorts of, they're not mutually exclusive. What we're talking about here is placing the mind in a scientific context, or in the context of reality. In reality, the mind is very much interconnected, interdependent with the body. They affect one another. They work together. They're very much a part of the same reality, two sides to the same coin, you could say. Once we understand that to be reality, there is no room to postulate things like a self, or things like a God, or so on. In fact, many of the things which we would care to postulate, many of the things we would care to believe in, are totally thrown out of the window. Understanding why there could not possibly be a self, could not possibly be a God, we have to come back and understand what is reality. Now, if we talk in terms of the physical, this is something that I think scientists don't often fully understand. I'm not sure, actually. I'm going to assume that it's often not understood, and I'll explain it. If it's already understood, then no problem. I think one of the things that is not fully understood is the idea of reductionism. Now, I do think that most scientists would consider themselves to be reductionists, but an understanding of what it means to be reductionist as opposed to holist. A holist is someone who believes that the whole is more than the sum of its parts. Reductionism says what is there is all that's real. Right? Holism says that once you put something together, poof, something else arises. And I think that scientists don't understand this because this is what the position they're coming to in terms of the mind. Mostly as materialists, they're coming to say that put the body together, poof, the mind arises. Reductionism says that what is there is what is real. If it's not there already, there's nothing that's going to bring it into existence. This is why they're looking for this, this idea of what are the building blocks of reality, because that's what's there, and it's not going to change. You're not going to put them together and poof, suddenly something else appears out of nothing. Things don't arise out of nothing, of course. So, what this means? Suppose we take this table I'm sitting on, or this robe I'm wearing, or any of the things in this room. Suppose we take a chair, and this is usually the most obvious example. A chair, we say it exists, and scientists, I think, in general will say it exists, but this is where we lose the scientific nature. The chair doesn't exist. In reality, the chair is made up of things which are real, and we don't know quite what those are in science yet. In terms of Buddhism, it's actually quite simple. It's made up of the four elements, and people thought these were Greek. Well, actually, it came from earlier from India. In the times of India, they were already talking about the four elements, earth, air, water, fire, and these are just the four properties of experienced reality. But, okay, so putting that aside, there is some physical reality. Now, the mind is exactly the same. The mind is made up of building blocks. Mostly we don't quite know what those are. I can give you my understanding of what they are. It's not really important. We understand that they're made up of building blocks. Some examples are emotions. We have anger. Anger is very much a building block of reality. Greed. Greed is very much a building block of the mental reality. Wanting things, exactly. Happiness, unhappiness, liking, disliking, and so on. Conceit, jealousy. These are some of the building blocks of the mind. Thinking, worrying, or so on. Many of the factors of the mind, experiencing the reality as seeing or hearing or judging something or being able to measure something. Association, being able to remember things. All of these different functions in the mind, these are the building blocks of the mind. Nowhere in here is it possible to say that when you put these things together, there arises a self. And so this is what reductionism means. It says that once you have these building blocks, there's no room for the chair, there's no room for the self, and there's no room for God. Now, God is a special example. Why is there no room for God? Well, we've got all these things here. Why isn't God something else? And this is something that often comes up in meditation. People who believe in God, they come to meditate and they say they still want to believe in God. They say, well, belief, you have to understand that where belief arises, belief is just a building block. It's a part of the mind that arises when your mind works in a certain way, or maybe it's even built up mixed up with the physical. It surely is. It's something that arises based on the functioning of the brain, the functioning of the body, the functioning of the mind, and how they function together. They give rise to belief. Even if you were to see God, and many people claim to have seen God, what is that? It's an experience of seeing, which is built up with the physical and the mental and the way the brain works, the way the mind works. Suppose you're sitting in prayer and suddenly you feel rapture. Well, again, that's simply rapture. And Sam Harris, of course, is an atheist who is very good at explaining this. And he said, you sit there and you say this is Jesus. Well, the Hindus are saying it's Krishna, and the Buddhists are saying, well, it's the way the mind works, and the scientists should be saying the same thing as well. The scientists will be saying it's the way the brain works, right? So I think the Buddhism and science in general are on the same wavelength. It's just we're coming from different sides of the coin. Buddhists understand the existence of the mind, and I think it's a shame that in general modern science doesn't. But at any rate, once you understand the existence of the mind, you completely blow the idea of the existence of a God out of the water. Even if you were to experience something that you could call God, well, I mean, what could that possibly be? When I experience another person, I still don't believe that's a person. It's still not a person. The reality of it is there's just body and there's mind working together. What if I were to see God, what more could it be than the experience and the object of the experience? So these are just some brief ideas, and this is, again, very superficial. It's something that has to be experienced through meditation, and it's not some kind of hokey-pokey meditation. It's simply watching and learning and understanding the way the mind works. It's a very scientific process, and you can't use physical tools to do it because it's not a physical thing. But when you use mental tools to look at the mind, you just look at your own mind, and there are ways of doing this that are very scientific. You'll see for yourself what are the building blocks of the mind, and God and the self are not in there. But again, this is something that takes a lot more explanation and a lot more realization to fully understand. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. This is just some more thoughts on the nature of reality.